We have a wonderful whole being named Susan Einhorn, who's going to be our practitioner doing our opening prayer today.
Good morning, and welcome to those viewing us online. So we'll start our opening prayer, and afterward we'll be followed by 2 minutes of reflection, and then we'll be brought back with some more great music. So just settle in to where you are. And so I acknowledge that presence, that spirit, that one life that is living in and through and as everything. It is the source of all creation. It is the trees, the blossoms. It is the love. It is every face, every heart, every action, every expression, visible and invisible. It is all powerful, all giving, and it is right here, right now. And because I recognize that this is all there is, that it is living within me, through me, creating every experience, every possibility, everything in me and through me and as my life. And I know that that is true, the truth for all, for everything, for it is all God. This substance of power everywhere. And so I recognize the gifts of spirit, that it is everywhere I am. I can never be separate from it, for it is right here in me. And I realize that there are times where I feel disconnected, like a leaf on a stream, being pushed or pulled in different directions. And I remember that there is a power here. There is a power within me, a power of my mind, for I am sharing that one mind of spirit. And so I open like a sail on a boat to catch that mind, to come into alignment with that great wind that will take me where it is growing and showing me more of what I am, more of what I can become, all that is good for me. And so I remember this, that my consciousness may open to grab hold of that spirit. And with this I am grateful knowing that this is for all, that all can be open and flow. I'm so grateful that Spirit is always here, always wherever I am, in whatever I'm doing, bringing all the good, all of the abundance, and all of the endless possibilities for my life. And with a grateful heart, I release this into Spirit, into that brings all into being. And together we say, and so it is.
So this month we're looking at, in our overall context of living out loud, loving out loud. That's one of our months, by the way, is loving out loud. They didn't do it during February, but whatever. And so living out loud, and this month we're looking at curiosity as a superpower. And Inquiring Minds Want to Flow is our talk title today. Inquiring minds, that's us, yes? Okay, want to flow. There's a saying that a mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's open. Yes? We know people whose minds are not open, yes? Now, here's the thing. I'm going to invite you to look in that mirror also and say, there are parts of my life where my parachute is going to take me straight down because it ain't open. And so we all have the opportunity to open our minds even more. Curiosity, wonder are ways of opening, and they lead to individual and collective evolution. If we're not curious, if we're not opening, if we're not expanding, nothing new happens. We get stagnant. Yes? Without curiosity, we don't grow. Without curiosity and questions. And some of the deepest questions we ask are, who am I? Why am I here? I'm going to give you the answers to those questions right now. Not. Because, when I figure them out, I'll let you know. The thing about deep questions are that the answers are unique to each of us. My why I'm here is not the same as your why you're here. Is not the same as the person sitting next to you's why you're here. And often, these questions take our whole lives to develop, and the answers continue to shift. They continue to shift. There's no neat, pat, final answer to any of these deep questions. Sorry. Which for many of us who are trained in school that we must have answers and the right answers to everything, it's really tough to not have an answer, not have the answer, right? I remember growing up in Catholic school, we had a catechism, little blue book which was a set of 70 questions and answers. And in 7th grade, we had to memorize this whole catechism so that we could have the privilege of being slapped by the Archbishop in a ceremony called confirmation, which confirmed that I was willing to be a soldier for Jesus. And it began, who made me? And the answer is, God made me. Why did God make me? God made me to know Him, love Him, and serve Him in this world and be happy with Him forever in the next. Now, those are okay, right? I can still say, yes, I might not say God made me, but I'm an emanation, an expression of the divine, as are we all. And I'm here to know God. That's why we're all here, yes? It's that deeper connection. And to love God and to serve, by that meaning allowing the Spirit to come through us. But then we get to questions 10 and 11. 10, why must you believe whatever God has revealed? I must believe whatever God has revealed because God is the very truth and can neither deceive nor be deceived. I'm okay with that. It's the next one. How are you to know what God has revealed? I am to know what God has revealed by the testimony, teaching, and authority of the Catholic Church. In other words, turn off your mind. You don't have to think. We'll tell you what to think. We'll tell you what to do. Now, for some people, this is a lovely reassurance. You've got a path. It's defined. There's security in my life path. Everything is handled. I don't have to wonder or question. They will tell me what I need to know and do. But as many of us, because I know you're here instead of in the traditional religion that has all the answers that you grew up in, yeah? If you're like me, and you are, many of us who grew up in faith traditions with all the answers discovered it ain't that easy and it ain't that simple. In Zen, there's a saying, if you meet a Buddha on the road, kill him. Breathe. This refers to the aspect of us that wants to believe it has all the answers and is now fully enlightened, which is a stopping point of growth, yes? When I know it all, there's no reason to move any further. It doesn't say go kill a person, by the way. No Zen monk has killed a person because they met him on the path wearing orange saffron robes. We have an aspect that wants to believe that we have arrived, and we are to kill that aspect, that belief within ourselves, so that we can continue to grow. Sitting with unanswered questions is uncomfortable. And it's one of the reasons that a lot of religions these days that claim to have all the answers are growing in popularity, are growing in attendance. Because people want that certainty. They want that path. The world seems very confusing, yes? And so people want answers. If I just do this, if I just do that. Our young people grow from a life that is relatively ordered and structured. You know, I've got this class at this time, and I've got these assignments that are due on this date, and I'll turn in my assignments, and I'll know if I'm doing well, or if I'm not doing well, I'll get all this nice feedback, and Sunday school's over. And they're released into a life where that structure ends. A lot of us who went through ministerial school, Buffy's enjoying ministerial school right now. I enjoyed ministerial school. The thing is that when ministerial school comes to an end, and suddenly you're in a church being a minister, and you're sitting there looking at a bunch of people and going, holy you know what? How do I be a minister? You know, my first church is out in Clarkston, Washington, in the middle of, nowhere, so to speak. It's the middle of God, but of course it's in the middle of geographically nowhere. And all of a sudden you're sitting there going, they didn't tell me about this. What do I do now? And we get that in life, don't you? How many of you came out of school, and unless you already had a job and a career planned out, said, what do I do now? And so we release our youth into this ending of structure, and as they try to figure out what to do with their lives, society hands them these empty boxes of platitudes. You're free. You have complete freedom to be whoever you want to be. You can do whatever you want. Dream big. There's infinite possibilities. Don't be afraid to fail. And really, all they want to know, all we want to know, is what do I do in my life? What do I do with my life right now? What do I do about work, about relationship, about health, about career, all that stuff? How do I make enough money to live while I'm doing all this and figuring all this out? Give me some answers, give me some structure. We're going to talk next week about structure. If we just say freedom, infinite possibilities, la, 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 you already have all the answers within. It's up to you. Define your own values. There's no structure. It's empty. Because especially in our early 20s, do you remember your early 20s? Some of you, it was pretty recent. Some of us, maybe a little while ago. We're trying to figure out what's up, what's down, what to do. So we need some structure, we need some guidance, not that turn your brain off will tell you what to think kind of constriction, but at least a little terra firma on which to stand. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Well, the answers we need begin to form. We need that structure. And it takes time and it takes experience to gain the perspective we need. George Bernard Shaw said, a vocation, and we're going to talk about a little bit the difference between career and vocation in a minute. A vocation takes a mob of appetites and organizes them into an army of purposes and principles. A mob of appetites. How many of us have or have had a mob of appetites? Right? I want this, I want that, I want everything. I want it all. Raymond Charles Barker, in his book, The Power of Decision, says, out of the field of infinite possibilities, we have to choose one and make it work. If we stay stuck in, I'm infinite possibility, we do nothing. We're worthless to our fellow beings. We're worthless to ourselves. We're just stuck in infinite possibilities, wandering. So we have to take one or two. and settle on that. A vocation takes a mob of appetites and organizes them into an army of purpose and principle. Often we begin our adulthood on the ego path, the intellectual path. What's my best career? What's my best career move? What's my best marriage that will support my life? What's my best gym? What's my best sport? How many people learned to play golf because they were told that that's where the power boys all played and the sport they all played? Not necessarily because they loved golf so much, but because that was the place where you needed to go. Older generation maybe. What's the best investments? What are the right toys to have? Okay? And we do our best to climb that ladder, to climb that mountain, if you will, not realizing that as we're climbing that mountain, we're gaining a perspective for the ladder that we really want to climb, the mountain we will really climb later in life. Our vocare, which is a Latin word for calling, our vocare, our vocation is what we're actually going for. Carl Jung described a vocation as an irrational factor that destines a person to emancipate themselves from the herd and from its well-worn paths. Anyone with a vocation hears the voice of the inner self. They are called. I'm going to suggest that if you're sitting in this room, you are probably part of that, at least to some degree. Sometimes we come to our calling because the ego path, the first mountain, the first ladder we climb, collapses. Yes? Anybody have that experience? As a friend of mine said, we climbed the ladder of success only to realize we were leaning it against the wrong wall. Sometimes the calling itself collapses it. Sometimes the career path stays intact, but changes its nature and its importance to us. Often we have a sense of our calling early, but we don't know how to make it happen. So we wander down the career path because it seems to be the logical next step. You know, I knew when I was young that I was in love with God and wanted to share that. I knew that when I was very young. I applied to Catholic seminary. Fortunately, my parents couldn't afford to send me there. Fortunately. Turned out to be a blessing in the long run. So I wandered through job after job after job after job. I have a resume that looks like, you know, it is a quilt work patch all over the place. And I know I have a couple of quilters in the room, so not a well-done quilt, okay? I had a friend of mine who's a human resources person who looked at my resume one time, and I always felt embarrassed about it later in life. And she goes, no, this is the resume of a creative person who can do anything. When I was in my early 20s, I went to a Johnson O'Connor, what do you call it, aptitudes testing organization in San Francisco. Took aptitude tests to find out what I wanted to do, what I could do. And they came back and said, there's no job that's ever going to fit you. Go save the world. Out of all these, you know, I blew out a whole lot of their categories of aptitudes of what I was good at. So I don't fit in a job. So I wander from job to job. Who did I come here, trying to answer the questions, who did I come here to be? Why am I here? What am I to do? Until finally, during a marriage that I've realized in hindsight its primary purpose seems to have gotten me into and through ministerial school, ushered me into my true vocare. This one. I was once driving a group of ministers out to a retreat, and one of the ministers who knew that I was in ministerial school said to me, couldn't you have found anything else to do other than be a minister? And there's an old saying among ministers that, you know, if you could find any other career, take it. I now know why they say that. Less with you guys, by the way. Much less with you guys. I look back at him, I said, you know, I tried almost every career path there is, and I failed at every single one of them. This is the only one I have left. And they all laughed and said, you're going to be a great minister. Thank you. And I've realized I had to go through all this wandering and wondering to arrive at an answer that was true for me. You know, we talk about inquiring minds want to flow. They do want to flow. We do want our minds to flow. But we have to understand that with that flow comes turbulence. With that flow comes stuff. There's a Richard Bach in the book Illusions has a wonderful story that he tells of a group of creatures that live by clinging to rocks in a flowing river. And one of them finally says, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to die of boredom. I'm going to let go. And everybody around him says, no, you can't let go. You'll be bashed against the rocks and die. But he finally lets go, and he's bashed against the rocks. He doesn't die, by the way. But we have to have that willingness, that risk, if we are going to ask these deep questions, if we are going to be inquiring minds and let our inquiring minds flow, to yes, we're going to get bashed against the rocks of life a little bit. Because we've been going a certain way for a long time, and the majority of the culture goes a certain way, and if we're going to let go of that way, it's going to be uncertain. We're going to get our egos bashed a little bit. I've a friend named Tama Keeves, who has written a couple of books on finding your perfect career, which hers was to be a writer. And she started off as a Harvard-trained lawyer in Boston, was doing well, and realized she hated it. Hated it. So she moved to Denver, became a waitress, and she said it was hard because all of her friends that she went to school with were having these, growing careers, making more and more and more and more money, lots of money. And she was doing this waitressing job as she was learning to write, as she was teaching herself to write and that. Today, she's very successful as a writer. She leads workshops around the country, is popular around the world, literally, has 2 or 3 books published, and has found her niche. But it took that initial let go of the rock I'm clinging to, that I think I should be clinging to, get bashed a little bit, but grow. If we have an inquiring mind that wants to flow, we have to be willing to have the turbulence. Because the real answers in life are often not easy to come by. And especially when we're working from the ego, they're totally hidden from view. It's like looking at a field out there that you can't see anything at. But when we turn and work from our heart, when we turn and work from our soul, when we live from that and inquire from that, the answers start to reveal themselves. And pretty soon it's like laying in a field with just gold nuggets laying around in plain sight. Ernest Holmes says the infinite has already implanted within us an instinctive intuition which is the spiritual knowledge of good. And our whole growth results from an inner awakening. As we inquire, as we question, it is our own inner awakening, growing, saying yes to something greater. And usually this awakening is gradual, which bugs the heck out of me. And probably you too. Don't you want the answers right now? Don't you want it all right now? But usually the awakening is gradual. We have to give it time. We have to give the answers time. We don't get voices in the sky saying, go here and do this. I was actually going to ask Shani to put a little reverb on me when I said that, but I forgot to ask her. So just imagine that with that voice of God, go here and do this. Thank you. If you do hear that voice, kill it. Rather, we sit with our questions, our curiosity, and allow answers to unfold. We allow them to form and reform as they will. Next week I'm doing a talk that's entitled, The World is an Oyster. Sorry, somebody just walked in from my past, and I know why he's here. Anyways, the world is an oyster, and an oyster grows its shell little bit by little bit by little bit, layer by layer by layer. It changes, it grows, it expands, yes? Yes. So we sit with our curiosity and let it expand, the answers unfold, to form and reform as they will, and to recognize that no answer we ever have is written in stone. I have a minister friend who asks every single year, do I still want to be a religious scientist? Every year, ask that question of herself. And it's a great question because if I ask this question, if the answer comes back yes, then I'm current with that answer. I know it. This is mine, and it's mine currently. It's not just sitting back there in the mind, oh, I'm just being a religious science minister today because I was yesterday. It's fresh. If the answer comes back no, that no has probably been building for a little while underneath anyways, and we need to pay attention to it. And so we get to ask ourselves at points in our lives, do I still want to be or do this? This is why couples renew their marriage vows, is because it's a way of saying, yes, I want to marry you again. Yes, I still want this relationship. We each have a unique purpose. We each have our own special way that we light up life. We light up life. It doesn't have to be a huge save the world vocare. It just needs to be us being authentically us in the service of a greater good than just our ego self. Although we can also still serve our ego self. It doesn't mean you have to do without and live in total poverty as you're giving to the world. No, it's a balance. We take it in and out. When we let go of our conditioned asleepness, do you know what I'm talking about? Our conditioned asleepness. Spell check doesn't like that word, by the way. When we let go of our fear and are willing to look deeper and connect with our true calling, we find that flow of joy that is running underneath the surface of life, waiting for us to just bring it up. As we give ourselves permission to wonder and wander, to be curious, to play in that, we find new and more authentic landscapes in which to live. So this week I invite you to do one spiritual practice, and that is take an aspect of your life and look at it with curiosity. Just with curiosity. Ask, what is the deeper call here? Ask, how can I open to more love, to more health, to more wealth, to more creativity, to more life, to more ease? Play with that in curiosity. How can I live more authentically here? Are you willing to do that practice this week? Great. I'm going to close with a quote from Audre Lorde. When I use my strength in the service of my vision, it makes no difference whether or not I am afraid. When I use my strength, when I use my vocare, when I'm using and being and living what I'm called to be, it makes no difference whether or not I'm afraid, because the vocare, the calling, is bigger than whether I'm afraid. We have a person who's going to do a little announcement after the announcements today that told me that they're a little bit nervous about doing that. And I said, oh, you're just asking friends for help. And kind of shift to that. But anytime we public speak, there's a little part of me that still is afraid every time I step up here. You'll judge me. You won't like what I'm saying. You won't like what I'm wearing. You won't like my nose or something, you know. And we have to move through that, because what is our vocare, what is our call, is more important than whether I'm afraid to do it. When I use my strength in the service of my vision, it makes no difference whether or not I'm afraid. We have an affirmation. Let's say this with me. I awaken more deeply to my inner call. One more time. I awaken more deeply to my inner call. And so it is. Look around at the faces of God, the faces of love, the faces of wisdom. Recognize that yours is one of those faces. Breathe that in, take it in. As we recognize that there is only one life, God is everywhere, as Brent's song says. Thoughts create because God creates. Because God is that thought, God is that consciousness flowing. And we are expressions of that flowing consciousness. Each of us is a thought of God. And then each of us thinks as God into form. And so I speak my word that this week we remember that truth of ourselves. We remember our light and our love and our wisdom and our joy and our passion and our vocare, our calling. And allow that to express gradually and ever more wonderfully to flow in our lives right here and right now. And I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for knowing this as the truth of our lives, as the truth of what shows up for us as we simply open to the divine ever more fully. And I release this knowing, this word as a seed into the fertile soil of the law, letting it grow, manifest, bloom into our lives, knowing it is already so, and we join together and affirm that by saying, and so it is.